Well, if 50 Shades of Grey is your fantasy, traffic's your nightmare. Hello everyone, I'm Taylor Bambico. I'm a self-published author of young adult urban fantasy, adult thriller, and erotica, and today marks 1 year my psychological thriller Traffic was first published. Spoilers if you haven't already figured that one out. Now, unlike Silent Rage and Parabellum, which were released previously and are on later editions, Traffic is still on its first. Of course, it may be on its first edition, however there were many earlier drafts. In fact, why don't we take a look at some of the earlier covers, shall we? So this particular version was the one I went through with a red pen looking for mistakes, and trust me, there were quite a few at that time. I printed this up through Lulu, only I have access to this version, trust me, you wouldn't want to read it anyway. Now, this was the cover I originally wanted to use. It was a pre-made cover from, I think, the book cover designer website. I truly wanted this to be it. However, after a closer look, I realized that was the city of Chicago, not New York. So me being me, decided to have an entire new one made for it. Once everything was complete, of course. And then of course there was this cover made by Clarissa Yeo of Yoklay Designs. I liked it, but nowhere near as much as this one. It's very well done, but didn't have the dark atmosphere I was looking for and didn't resonate with me as much. I also like having the Beretta 92FS pistol on the cover, which I mentioned in my video on that particular firearm. As I look back on it, even though the concept of this story dates back about 11 or 12 years, sex trafficking was always the main subject of this particular book. Though one significant change was the antagonist of the story. Originally it was going to be like the Mafia and the Triads were involved, then I changed it to the rich elite and those involved. It made the story a bit more interesting actually. Either way, it was going to be bad for what happens to Nicole Collins. On that note, originally Nicole's last name was Baxter. It worked at the time, but then as I progressed with the story, I realized it just doesn't really work. So I started looking into it, and I ended up using Collins. Of course, the moment after I chose that, I remember that the song by Genesis, Just a Job to Do, actually appears in this particular story. Of course, Phil Collins is the singer of Genesis. I had no intention of doing that, but I like how it turned out. And that song fits the story very well as far as I'm concerned. Also, Nicole's mother's middle name is Sturm, and I make that as a reference to Sturm Ruger, not the fact that I'm a fan of Lacey Sturm. In fact, I do mention that in the beginning of the book, how Nicole makes the connection between her mother's middle name, Sturm, with Sturm Ruger, which she thought was pretty cool. And being a fan of Lacey Sturm and Flyleaf, the use of that name was unintentional. Now, on the topic of music, that actually changed quite a bit as well throughout the story. I talked about this in a much earlier video, but I decided why not recap on it since we're doing the 1 year anniversary of Traffic. Originally, Nicole was a fan of 80s metal bands, Metallica, Black Sabbath, and the like, but I changed that to the grunge bands of the 80s and 90s, Nirvana, Stone Temple Pilots, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden. I have the playlist for Traffic on my website. I'll just put the link in the description below for everyone as well. And Lacey Sturm and Flyleaf were a part of that playlist, and when I met her a couple years ago, I got to tell her how 4 of her songs were an influence for this particular book, Rot being one of them, of course. That song actually deals with content found in this book. Real quick, I'm just going to link that music video right here for everyone and also in the description below. Amongst many, one interesting aspect of the story is the time it takes place in. February till June of 1993. A couple severe incidents actually occur throughout the timeline of the story. The first being the attack at the World Trade Center and the incident outside Waco, Texas involving the government and the Branch Davidian Church. I touch on those a bit because they were relevant to current events. Speaking of current events of a specific time, on this day last year, the 29th of May, the ebook actually was released, while the paperback was released a day earlier. That's one issue I have with the KDP format. It doesn't let you set up a specific release date. Really frustrating, actually. Of course, more interesting still, a month or so later after Traffic was released, a prominent individual was arrested in New York on human trafficking charges. I put up a short video on that several months ago. In fact, I think it was about the month that happened, and it was just really odd timing. If I had published Traffic a couple years ago, it would probably been more viewed as a conspiracy novel, whereas today it seems a bit more plausible, especially considering what's been entering the light. Now, on a slightly different subject, when I first settled on the antagonist being a CEO of a company, someone actually said to me, "Oh, a rich CEO after a cute girl, that's like 50 Shades of Grey." No. I remember when 50 Shades was the craze and there were some women saying it was their fantasy. Well, if 50 Shades of Grey is your fantasy, Traffic's your nightmare. I read that book, and if anything, 50 Shades taught me how not to write erotic material, especially involving BDSM. Carol Brown did a great review on that book. In fact, I'll put it right here and in the description below for everyone. If you have the time, go check that out. It really was well done. In all honesty, along with being a psychological thriller, Traffic would fall under the rape and revenge category. The main difference, at least from the stories I found, was that my protagonist was already aware of this evil existing, and because of that, Nicole already had a desensitized perspective on the world, especially towards people who might endanger her. She always viewed them as different than everyone else, nothing more than mere empty figures, to put it bluntly. So now that I've covered some of the darker aspects, why don't we move on to the lighter parts of Traffic? There was something about writing the book set in New York City that was just awesome to do. Sure, Miami, Florida for Parabellum was great, and Chicago and other cities for Silent Rage was fun as well. However, there was just something about New York City, whether it be the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, or Staten Island, that really was intriguing. What I learned about places I feature in this book had me hooked like nothing before. For instance, a main part of the story takes place in the Empire State Building, and now whenever I see it, I'm like, except I'm not snapping my finger. Learning about the laws regulating firearms in New York City was frustrating. That's an entire different subject for an entire different video, so moving on. One scene I enjoyed writing the most, without a doubt, was the masquerade ball that takes place in the Javits Center. Of the 3 books I've written, Traffic is my favorite, and the masquerade ball is the scene I enjoyed writing the most. Hands down. Yes, more than the sex scenes in Silent Rage. Yes, more than the parts dedicated to firearms. Along with Traffic being my favorite, it also contains a vehicle I enjoyed riding the most as well. Yeah, the monster truck in Parabellum is fun. The semi-trucks in Silent Rage never get old, but Nicole's 1980 Pontiac Trans Am hardtop with the Starlight black paint and the red hood bird was just fun. And no, it's not because of Smokey and the Bandit. Being New York, I'm sure there's a few around for the most part, but how often do you see one? The Trans Am really fit Nicole's personality better than any of the other cars I had in mind. Which, actually, as I look back at the options, none of them really fit the story and none of them seem like one she'd own. I thought about various Mustangs, the Boss 429, the Shelby Cobra, whether it be the GT350 or the 500, but those just, it's been used before and it just didn't seem to really fit her as well. I mean, just something about them, it just didn't fit. She actually had a Chevy Chevelle in the first and second draft, I believe, and just didn't work. Then there was the GTO and the Dodge Charger, which were in the back of my mind, but I was like, no, I don't want to use them here, so I'll probably use them in another story. So much has changed in the 11 or 12 years. I mean, when you really stop and think, it's pretty impressive that something I had thought of back in like 2008, 2009, and then, well, 10 years from then, it was 2019 or 2019, whatever you want to say. I don't know. Is it 2019, 2019, 29? I don't know. That's funny how you say, is it 2009, 2009, or 2009, whatever it is. It's just weird. Let's get back to the story. I'm not going to go off on a tangent about the years and why that matters. I don't know. I really don't know. But back to the story. After all these years, I really am satisfied with how the story turned out. Now, I said the masquerade ball was my favorite part. However, there was another scene I really did enjoy, and that was a part right where Nicole, after she takes care of an issue, which I'm not gonna spoil that for you for sure. When you read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. Well, she decides to go to an adult retailer to acquire a few things for a special someone. And I'm saying special very lightly. Anyway, with her being a private investigator, which I don't think I actually mentioned before. Maybe in another couple other videos I talked about that, but I didn't say anything in this video, so my apologies on that. Nicole Collins is a private investigator out of Queens, New York City. Or actually, not Queens, New York City, just Queens. Just Queens. Just leave it at that, Queens. She's a private investigator because that's what her father did, and she just figured, why not? Because of that line of work, she has made disguises, she has quite a few wigs. I almost said rigs there. It's wigs. Weird when you try to say rigs and you say wigs, you mispronounce it, but yeah, this time wigs. In this scene, she's wearing one of her favorite wigs. It's a auburn wig. I wouldn't say auburn, but it's kind of a dark red, and that was influenced by a model. I shouldn't say follow. That sounds weird to say you follow a model, but yeah, a model who's on Instagram who I follow on there. Susan Coffey. Anyway, Susan used to dye her hair red. I really like that. I said, why don't we put that in a book? In fact, I actually have, throughout all my books, there's always a redhead for some reason. Well, I shouldn't say for some reason. I like redheads. Why not? That's a squirrel moment right there.
He is a good and smart master, and he made me this collar so that I may talk. Squirrel!
Anyway, back to what I was saying. We keep going off the whole squirrel moment. Anyway, it deals with the adult retailer was Eros. It used to be Eros Femina. Now it's Eros Fornicato. It's horrible. I wrote it down in the book. I wrote that down so I wouldn't forget it, and yet I do forget it because, well, actually that's why I wrote it down, so I wouldn't have to remember. I always remembered it as Eros Femina because that's what it was for the longest time. I like that scene because Nicole's walking through downtown Manhattan. I forget the exact address. It's in the book. And I mean, I just think that's pretty cool because she's thinking, oh, well, this wig attracts a lot of attention, but she's not really worried about that. So Susan Coffey's hair influenced that wig that Nicole has. And then another scene later on in the Empire State Building, there was a photo from a shoot she did several years ago, which influenced that. When I say she, I'm referring to Susan in this case, who was sitting by a window and looking out. And I translated that, or I shouldn't say translated, but I kind of mirrored that and put that scene into Traffic just because I really liked how it was done. In fact, I think in the movie Heat with Robert De Niro and Val Kilmer, there's a part with Val Kilmer where I think it's at a beach house. Anyway, he's sitting and looking out, or either asleep, and that's based on a painting. So I'm not the first person to do this. I definitely won't be the last. That was just pretty cool. And the scene, not the one where Nicole will be looking out the window. I think I said it, if I didn't say it was the Empire State Building, it's the Empire State Building she was looking out of. In the other scene where she was at the adult retail store, that's the part where she's joking about whether or not she should have been a model. And I said that in the Parabellum video, how the reason Riley Kane was a model, well, I shouldn't say just a model, she was a supermodel, is that was a running gag. I think I said it in that video. She was just decide, oh, should I have been a model? Should I just been a private investigator? I really don't know. Would I have had more fun doing that? I don't know. Either way, I just wanted to put that in there because why not? So I didn't want this to be a very long video and go on tangent after tangent like I did with the 1 year later Parabellum video, even though I think I've already done that here. So for everyone who's made it through this entire video, I do thank you. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did anyway. I mean, this book was, I said, it's my favorite book I've written so far. I can't wait to do any more. Do stick around, check out the channel, see if there's anything else that I put up that you might find interesting. And with that being said, again, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider subscribing. Click on the bell icon so you're notified when I upload new content. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and have a good day. See ya!